Hi everyone, I'm Pat Prokop, and I get a lot of questions, people asking me what would be a first good telescope to buy for my son, my daughter, my husband, my wife, my nephew, my niece, whatever. You know, I have telescopes here in the Heavenly Backyard Garden, and you don't want to start off with something like this because that will overwhelm you, not to mention the price tag as well. But anyway, let's look at some of the advices on how to buy and how to pick a good first telescope. Hi, I'm Pat Prokop once again, and I'm in the Heavenly Backyard Garden.
Well, first of all, there are two main types of telescope. You have the refractor, a glass lens in the front of the telescope, and a reflector, a parabolic mirror in the back of the telescope.
You know, this telescope here is a refractor telescope. It uses a lens to focus the light through an eyepiece. This is a reflector telescope, and it uses a mirror in the back of the telescope, once again, to reflect the light back into the eyepiece, which in this case is over here.
The next thing you have is the objective, the focal length and the F ratio that you need to know about. The objective is simply the size of the lens or the primary mirror and is usually measured in millimeters but could be expressed in inches. There are 25.4 millimeters in an inch. So an 80 millimeter objective, let's say, measured in inches would be 80 divided by 25.4, which is 3.1 inches. Well, it doesn't matter which unit you use, but it's important that you use the same units for the value of the focal length. Now, the focal length is the value of the length it takes for the object passing through the lens or reflecting from the mirror to reach its focus. It's as simple as that. That's the focal length. Now, the focal ratio is also known as the F ratio and is simply the size of the focal length divided by the objective size. For example, a telescope with an objective of 80 millimeters and a focal length of 400 millimeters will have an F ratio of 5. That is 400 divided by 80. And in many times, this is referred to as F5. So for a beginner or a novice, your first telescope should have a focal ratio somewhere around F4 to F7. Anything less will yield a very wide field of view, but many of the targets will appear very small, including the moon. A focal ratio greater than 7 will result in a target to appear very, very large, which could be a good thing, but the high focal ratio in a telescope are very difficult to find the target. High focal length telescopes are primarily used to view the planets, but a seasoned telescope user experience is greatly beneficial to try to find your target with a high F ratio. The higher focal ratio would be a good second telescope once the person becomes more familiar with the first telescope. It would be nice to have that high focal ratio telescope, but without experience, it could become extremely frustrating and could lead to losing interest in using it. I know. My first telescope was F10. I thought I was getting a great telescope, and it is a great telescope, but for a beginner, it wasn't all that great. I had a devil of a time trying to find the targets up in the sky. Little did I know if I used an F5 or an F7 telescope, it would have been much easier to learn how to use the telescope. Now, with a medium-sized focal ratio, not only is it easier to find your targets, but by using different eyepieces, you can then magnify the target. Many beginning telescope kits will come with 2 or 3 eyepieces. Again, they are mostly measured in millimeters. The higher the millimeter value results in less magnification and should be used to find your target. Once you lock in on your target with the high millimeter lens or the wide field view of lens, then simply swap out the eyepieces to magnify your view. Keep in mind though, the higher the magnification, the faster the target will move out of the field of view due to the rotation of the Earth. The next item of interest is the device that holds the telescope, and in most beginning kits, this will be probably a tripod. A good sturdy tripod is essential to hold the telescope firm and make it easy to move the scope to the desired target. I would strongly suggest to avoid getting an equatorial mount at this stage. Let that be something to consider as the person becomes more familiar with the scope and of the sky. The last thing you want is to become discouraged because you just simply can't find the targets because of being unfamiliar with how to operate an equatorial mount. These mounts are for more advanced users and will provide great tracking abilities, particularly with those that are equipped with sophisticated clock drives that compensate for that rotation of the Earth. When it comes to astrophotography, a whole nother chapter, that mount becomes the most important piece of equipment and can cost several $1,000s. In many cases, the mount will cost more than the telescope, but you don't have to worry about that right now. This is a beginner's telescope. Now, the price of a beginner's telescope will rely heavily on the quality of the lens or the mirror. The lower cost scopes, those basically less than $100, are packaged with low-grade glass and are only good for looking at the moon, maybe, or birds on the other side of your backyard. That's about it. The higher grade glass for the lens will reduce a phenomenon known as chromatic aberration. That is, the separation of red, green, and blue light rays not coming into focus. Low-grade glass will show bright stars and other objects with different colors dancing around them. Some of the telescopes will come with 2 different types of lenses paired together to offset this chromatic aberration, providing clearer images and are known as doublets. And even more expensive telescopes will have 3 lenses bonded together, which greatly correct the issue, resulting in a very clear image. These are referred to as triplets. That's the kind of telescopes I have right now. There are even quadruplets and quintuplet telescopes, but these are extremely expensive. I don't even have one of those. Most of mine are the triplets. So when looking for a decent telescope for a gift for a beginner, keep in mind these issues. Also, there's a lot of truth to the saying, yeah, you get what you pay for.
Well, I hope this video helps you deciding on what kind of telescope to get and the quality of telescope to get for that first telescope for that budding astronomer, whether it's your son, your daughter, your niece, your nephew. You know, when I was 7 years old, my uncle bought my brother and me a telescope, and I just was enthralled with the objects I was able to see in my own backyard. And you can get that excitement brewing in your own yourself or with your sons, your daughter, your nephews, your niece, even your spouse. And remember, the heavens are just filled with majestic wonders. And unless you need rain, I hope for clear skies so you can see all those majestic wonders in your own backyard in a sky near you.